I'm bell to bell, and actually usually with my kids, I'm teaching the moment the bell rings, so we'll just go ahead and start. And if people come in late, I'll just tell them to come on in and come down front, but we've got a lot to cover. And how many teachers do we have in here? You are a practicing teacher. Oh, excellent. So I can be real practical with y'all. And then IT integrators or / coaches, very good. We don't have any principals, do we? We do. Oh, good for you. I love it when principals come, because that means you're a teacher's principal, and those are the best kind. You're nodding your head, yes. We love teacher principals who really get what it's like in the classroom. Who else? Librarians? Okay, good. Okay, y'all. We're going to talk about technology-driven differentiated instruction. Okay, so I'm going to take the differentiation research about how do we differentiate, and I'm going to relate it to what I actually do in my classroom. The exciting news is I actually redid a lot of this and added new screenshots from what I'm doing in my classroom right now for this, and then also for my other presentations. So I was glad I got to fly in a little early so I could do that. So, you know, I'm a teacher. I really feel like I'm a beginner at a lot of things, and I try to keep that attitude of beginning. How many of you have learned something new at this conference you've never heard of? Okay, you know, the toughest thing with trying something in your classroom is you feel like that it might fail or it might mess up, but those are okay. It's okay when you try something new. I do try to test things pretty well before I bring them in with my kids, but sometimes, I mean, I was on this amazing website where you could talk to great leaders in history, and once I had 3 kids get on it, it crashed, and there's no way I could have known that. We just used that as a lesson. So I'm going to flip through a couple of these things here because I should have hidden those. I thought I had. Okay, so here's the thing about trendy that always makes me nervous, is be real careful about trendy when you're a teacher, because we can't afford to mess up based on trendy. Now this is the Revigator. The Revigator was lined with radioactivity because the big N thing at this time period was atomic nuclear energy and all that sort of thing. So they're actually sold 250,000 of these lined with radioactive clay for people to put juice and water and all that, and it was trendy. Okay, well, trendy got them toxic levels of radon, arsenic, lead, vanadium, radium, and it was radioactive. Okay, and if you put juice in it, you would have cancer within 6 months because the acid of the juice would get that all into you. So that's what trendy gets us. I'm not saying don't go trendy. Now, a lot of people are talking about Socrative. It's trendy for a reason. It's doggone good. Anybody using Socrative in the classroom? Okay, if you're a math teacher, how many math teachers do we have? Okay, that needs to be on your big 3. It just absolutely does. Socrative is amazing. But it's trendy for a reason. But then there's trendy, you know, oh, everybody's doing this. Well, everybody's not you. As long as you're doing something, that's enough, and that's okay. So beware of the trendy and embrace what you know is effective and what works. So also remember that there are always safe ways to do what some consider dangerous. So realize that you can make things work, and that it's not about the technology, it's always about what it lets you do. So I always try to look at what technology lets me do. Okay, let me flip ahead here because you guys are teachers. You're going to be more interested. Now here's the problem with technology. The problem with technology is it is so expensive, and people want to know, what am I getting out of the technology? Now, don't boo when I say the word test score, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, does it improve test scores? And yeah, you know, the question is the test. I mean, right now the question most people have is the test worthy of scoring well on? That is a question across the country. Is this a test we really need to be giving? Okay, so we're not going to really talk about that, although all of these can help you improve. But we need technology that makes us more efficient, it needs to make us more effective, and it needs to transport us to a better education. That's what technology needs to do for us. It is not just to look cute. I have teachers in my school, and I'm sure you do in yours, that the only time that they take the cover off their computer is when it's parent-teacher night. They brush it off. They say, you need to fix this piece of software, it won't run, I want it up on the screen. I'm going to teach one designated kid how to use it so they can look cute at the computer like they're using it, like I'm using it in my classroom, and then when parent-teacher night is over, I'm going to cover it up and never use it again. But it's not to look cute, it's actually to use it. It should be dirty, it should be musty, it should be, you know, it should be used, it should have fingerprints all over it. But the power of technology is that every child learns differently. How many of you have children? Okay, how many of you have grandchildren? Do you ever wonder, how did these kids grow up in the same house? Yeah, all the time. 2 of my 3 have learning differences. And I say learning differences because disabilities are defined in the age in which you live. If I had been born in the age of Socrates, I would have been in the slow class because I am so weak on auditory. I have to see everything, I have to write everything down. But in this age, I could be first in my class in college and first in my class in high school because I learned by reading books. That's how I learned. I don't really need a good teacher. I could teach myself. So we have to be real careful with how we define learning disabilities, and what I want to see is when I have a kid, I talk about all the different learning styles. I talk about, are you an auditory learner? You know, auditory learners, if they take too many notes, sometimes it shuts down that auditory going in here. So I want to teach them how to record. I want them to use live scribe pens. I want them to use all kinds of other things that will help them based on how they learn. So different means differentiated. We want to differentiate. We want to do things differently. Now I'm going to open with a story, and then I'm going to start sharing you a lot of very practical tools. There was a boy in Austria in one of our projects in Flat Classroom. And we always do a presentation at the end where we share what we learned. But this boy could not communicate. Any special needs teachers in here? Okay, this boy could not communicate. When he would stutter. He had a horrible speech impediment, and he couldn't communicate. Well, he wanted to make a film in the project, and he asked his teacher, can I film when I go home? And the teacher said, sure, and she really didn't expect much. She didn't expect to be able to post the video or anything. Well, when he came in, she said she almost fell off her chair, because here is the young man at home, filming himself at home with no speech impediment at all. Nobody was in the room. He was just talking to the computer. She said, what on earth has happened? Well, he was so excited, he actually ended up winning an award. Everybody was shocked. And they're like, you know what? Something happens when this young man talks to a computer. And so he went and he said he wanted to present online. Well, they had prepared us. We do these things called student summits, and all the kids go in and they present. And y'all in the back, I started a little early so we could get out early for lunch. There are seats in the front, and we do not consider it rude if you come take them, because we were in here for a little while, so come on up. But he was getting ready to present, and she had prepared us and said, you know what, when so-and-so presents, he's probably going to stutter, and it may take him 5 minutes to get out 6 words. We were all ready, all the other kids were ready, we were just going to sit there and just let it happen. When the child put on his headphones and talked to that computer, he spoke eloquently without a speech impediment. I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it. And she said, you know what, because we had an audience that was somewhere else, and we had an excuse to use technology to communicate that audience, we have now found out how to unlock this child. So now, when they need to do oral quizzes with him, they give him the questions, he records it into the computer on video. Now that's just an anecdote. It needs to be studied, and if we have any college professors, that's the kind of thing that needs to be studied. But when you have an autistic child that their life is changed because they use technology and they collaborated with people, that's a story you need to tell people and say, hey, there is something different here. But if he had not had the opportunity to collaborate, if somebody said, you know what, your special needs, you don't need to work with people other places, nobody ever would have known. We had a double amputee that did videos for one of our projects from up in the Northeast, and they said that child, after he won an award, everybody viewed the child differently because they saw him as a great movie producer, and he was in a wheelchair, and they completely saw him differently. So when you connect kids, especially those with special needs, you give them great opportunities. So here's the big thing: deliver as much as possible using dual encoding. Now, I'll talk about learning styles, and there's some people who dispute whether these really exist. Okay, I'm not going to debate whether they exist, because there is no debate on dual encoding. That is using more than one sense. If you have people listening and reading at the same time, we know that is proven to improve their reading ability. One thing that I try to make sure all my students know how to do is to download from LibriVox, where you have all the works of Shakespeare and all that. You can download it. Do they know how to download we call them books on tape? You know, do they know how to go to Audible and download it so they can listen? Some kids who may not be diagnosed actually learn better by listening, and they're more auditory. It's great that they know that there are options for how they need to do things. So you want them to know how to do it. When they're trying to memorize to be or not to be, I had a kid who just could not memorize it for anything, but he was very auditory. I said, okay, grab your iPhone, let's record it. We recorded the to be or not to be speech he had to give in order to graduate. We put it in his iPhone. He sat in the corner of my room. He put his earphones in. He closed his eyes, and he listened to the speech. He listened to it 6 times, and he went and said it perfectly. And actually, he got bonus because he kept going and didn't know where it stopped. So, and that was because, and he tried to learn it for weeks. I mean, he was about in tears. But it was because I said, you know what? We need to do this with a different modality. We need to do this with your hearing. So we're going to talk about 2 things. We're going to spend most of our time on the classroom. We have 1 principal, so we'll spend a tiny little wink of time on administration, but not too much. Most of it's on the classroom. Okay, so we're going to build a car today. We'll start with the tools, your framework. Anybody use the term toolkit? Yeah. Okay, toolkit. You build a toolkit. You have a set of things that once they know how to do it, you don't really have to teach it anymore. Okay, so I'm going to take you through my toolkit, and I'm going to show you each year where I added different things to my toolkit. Your toolkit is different. Okay, so we're going to assemble my framework, and we're just going to go straight through it. First of all, I started with educational networking. I do not run a social network. Don't call it a social network. If you call it a social network, they will socialize. You will have problems that you have when people socialize. We have educational networks, and here's why you need to call it an educational network. My son is at Georgia Tech. He's a freshman, and they have an educational network. They expect you to be a professional student in there. It is not to socialize. You will be penalized in your grades if you socialize in an educational network. You will. So we need to have them ready to be professional students. We should have learning management systems. We should have ways that they interact in those spaces. Now for me, I use Ning. I have a private Ning. I pay about $280 something a year for it. I like it because it's so much like Facebook, I don't have to teach it. The tool is irrelevant because we can do everything we need to do in there. They can blog, they can share videos, they can share hyperlinks. We can do everything that I want them to do. And it's a lot like the blogging experience. And it has a lot of features that help you like things and move them up and that sort of thing. Now, how many of you use Edmodo? A lot of people use Edmodo for this purpose. Who has others? Schoolology? Anybody use Schoolology? Okay, we have 1. Anybody else use something for this purpose? You have an educational network. Moodle? Have any Moodlers? Okay. Anybody else have something else I haven't named? Speak up. No, so those are the 3 that it sounds like green here. What? My Big Campus, okay. So there are all kinds of ways that you can have a place for kids to interact. And again, y'all can come on down front. Y'all help people find a seat. There's some over here if you want to sit down here. Okay, and also what I talked about this morning, let them help you build your networks. So here's some choices: Ning, Edmodo, Schoolology. Some people are kind of using Google Plus this way. Now that we can enable for certain grades in certain classes the Google Plus features, remember it's not, you really shouldn't do it for kids under 13. Hashtags on Twitter. A lot of college professors have a hashtag on Twitter, and that's how they aggregate the conversation and move there. Sophia.org, which is kind of a flipped class tool, is a place that you can do some things, and of course Moodle. So there's lots of places that you can have an educational network. This is Edmodo. We use Digitine. We had Digitine on there for that. And the thing I like about Edmodo is kids can actually turn stuff in. And it kind of has a little bit of a grading thing in the back end. Now you still have to turn around, and we use PowerSchool, so I have to turn around and type it in PowerSchool, but there are some cool features in there. The second thing I added was a wiki. Well, cooperative learning is really big at my school, and if you look at what wikis let you do, they are the greatest tool ever invented for cooperative learning. Now they don't allow simultaneous editing, but let me tell you why they're so completely important. At the college level, wikis have really transformed many, many colleges because it allows you to take huge repositories of information like writing and all these ways we do things, and many, many people can edit. Now I know Wikipedia is a bad word for a lot of people, but if you look at the accuracy of Wikipedia, it's actually pretty good. And I want my students to be able to edit Wikipedia if it's necessary. I want them to understand what it means to edit it in a professional way, and it's not a game. They need to know that there are real consequences if you edit in an inappropriate way. But I want them to be a contributor in the 21st century world and be able to edit a wiki. So I have a wiki-centric classroom. You can look at it now even. It's westwood.wikispaces.com. My kids are planning their lesson plans for Hour of Code this week. I was in there checking them last night, looking at what they've planned to do, and I'm real excited about, this is one from one group that they had already done a lot of their plans before I left. So they're using Tinker and Scratch. They have the link so that other kids can get there, and then I use the hook. Anybody else use the hook at the beginning of their lesson? If you've read Teach Like a Pirate, he always talks about the presentation skills. So when kids come in the room, I always look at how am I going to be dressed? What's my music going to be? What's it going to sound like? I always have something to bring them into the lesson. What's my theme for the day? I played that old song, You Can Do Magic, the other day, and I was teaching them hotkeys, and I showed them a magic trick, and we did some stuff. So whatever it takes to bring them into the lesson, you want to do. And actually, if you have a really good hook, it will save you time because they will come running. They know the moment that bell rings, I'm starting, and that whatever I do at the beginning of class is always a blast, and they're going to miss it if they don't get there. It's really nice because nobody has to go to the bathroom anymore. But that book is Teach Like a Pirate by Dave Burgess. I highly recommend it for every teacher. So, number 3, student productivity tools. Students have devices. They have no clue how to use them. They have no clue how to be productive. They don't know how to make a list. They take pictures of your board. They can never find it again. So using devices to be able to be productive is very important. A lot of schools don't require planners anymore. Well, we're not requiring them to prove that they write stuff down either. So we use Google Calendar in my classroom. I teach them how to subscribe to the school calendars. We put the basketball and the football and everything on the Google Cal. I do want them to pick a to-do app. I don't care what app they pick. There are a lot of great ones out there. I kind of like Finish. Finish was created by 2 16-year-old boys who had a problem of procrastination. And I think they're 17 now. It's 99 cents. It's great, and it has Nag Me mode, which it'll nag you every hour if you haven't done something, if you turn it on. And sometimes I do put on Nag Me mode because I have things I don't want to do. E-notebooks. This is something I'm really getting into. It's my objectives for this year. I'm trying to come up with enough money to buy everybody Evernote, but until I do, for now, I'm encouraging them to get Evernote. We've used OneNote before. The one thing about OneNote, if you have a really smart IT person who really knows, and you have a good server on the back end that's running one of the Microsoft server products, OneNote is a great solution. But I am the IT director, and I have subcontractors who help me. So I am not going to do that because it would be too much on me. So, and then we have an app of the week. Every week I have a different app. Dragon Dictation, the Mailbox app. The Mailbox app is the best app for checking your email because you can actually swipe and say, you know what, I want to see this afternoon, or I want to see this tonight, or I want to see this tomorrow. It's a lovely app. By Dropbox, you can get extra Dropbox space by signing up for Mailbox. And then things like Lumosity. Anybody using Lumosity in their school? Using it personally? Okay, there's some really, really interesting research based on Lumosity. Okay, Lumosity is a brain game. There is a premier version you can buy in some schools. I tried to get us in the Lumosity program. I still haven't heard back yet if I got in. But there's some real interesting research for, trying to help kids do their math problems faster, trying to think faster. If you're having trouble concentrating, I asked all of my students to play Lumosity for the last 3 weeks, and I have them recording if they think it's helping them pay attention better, it's helping them focus better. I know for me, it's been helping me a lot. I have my mom and dad playing it because there's actually some preliminary research showing some benefits with dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. So Lumosity is a great free app. You can pay for the premium, but it's a great free app to recommend to your family. So these are the kind of things that I have my students do. We're always talking productivity. We're always talking about what can we do to be more efficient. We all know that we have to have a calendar. I still use a paper planner for every day. I have these custom pages I kind of designed myself. So are you writing things down? Do you have a list? And I'll ask them for much of the year. I'll turn to them and I'll say, okay, show me your list. I don't care what their list is in, but they have to have a list, and I'll take a grade on that. Do you have a list? Do you know what you need to do? There's some research that shows that people who are more satisfied in their work are people who can actually set their goals for the day and then at the end of the day know if they accomplished it. So the question is, are we letting our students set their goals for the day, or are they just little robots who respond to everything? Are they planning? Are they getting ahead? Do they realize they have a paper due Thursday that they need to work on today? Those are the kind of things we need to help them with. 4 and 5 are video and audio creation. Audacity is a big friend in my classroom. How many of you use Audacity? Awesome. They need to know how to record, they need to know how to edit, they need to know how to mix, they need to know what's appropriate for them to use. Podcasting, you know, do they know how to do all this kind of stuff? I don't really teach it. I mean, I take them into Audacity once or twice, I teach them some basics, I do some cool things and make somebody's voice into Darth Vader and such. But once I do the basics and I teach them how to export as a WAV or an MP3, at that point, I don't have to teach them anymore. Now, I do want them to know how to record on their iPhone or their iPad, how to email it to themselves, and then convert it so they can use it. Now, some of you, you're hearing me talk and you're thinking, Vickie is a little bit geeky and it's, okay? It's okay if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just sharing my framework. Yours is going to be different. Making videos is very important. I love iMovie on the iPad. Anybody using that? Oh, it's so much easier. Now, I use Pinnacle Studio in my classroom just because I'm really kind of geeky and I like to make good film. But these are the other things that my students do. We talk a lot about visual grammar in my classroom. There's a great curriculum. There's 2 curriculum that I have links here, AFI Digital Film Curriculum, and then there's the CTI Digital Film Model that you can use that has a lot of material. Do they know the word storyboard? Do they know what screenshots are, production schedule, editing, soundtracks, copyright? There's some great teleprompter apps. Now, one of the problems that I've had when shooting a lot of film, I always require every student to create a video when I do video. If you don't, do you know what happens if you do not require every student to make a film? Anybody been there before? You get one student who does all the work and the rest of them throw pencils at the ceiling, and it's not a good experience, okay? So every kid has to make their own video. But what do you do when you got 1,000 scripts going 1,000 different directions? Well, you download teleprompter free, you throw the script into it, you have your camera, and you hold up teleprompter free on your iPad right up underneath it, and they can just read the teleprompter, and if you hold it up right up under the camera, you can't tell they're not looking at the camera. And so that's a great way to deal with the fact that they hadn't memorized their script. You just hold that teleprompter under there and it goes right there. So these are some of the things that they need to learn. They may not learn it in your classroom, but at your school, you should say, where are kids talking about visual grammar? The video is the modern essay. Okay, used to the world changed because people like Patrick Henry wrote amazing things. Now it's changing because people are making amazing videos. So you have your ISTE-NET standards, so where people need to collaborate globally, and that is part of my curriculum. How am I collaborating outside of my classroom? I'm going to talk more about flat classroom later, but these are the 5, what I consider the 5 phases of collaborating globally. First of all, you're connecting within your own class. If my students do a wiki project together, I don't let them sit side by side. I require every single student to edit the wiki. If you're invisible, you do not exist, okay, in the online world. So where I want them to do is I'll have one over here, one over here. They have to know, how do I collaborate and work together across the room? Then, anybody have multiple preps of the same class? Do you teach the same class more than once? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll have my first period ninth graders and my second period ninth graders. They'll have a partner in the other class that they'll never see face to face. Okay, and then I start having partners in other schools. You could do that across the district. I think every district should have collaborative projects between schools. And then you move to what's called a managed global connection. I'll talk more about that in my next session. Student to student with teacher management, and then student to student where the students are actually running the projects. And all that is in my book. My first book is Flattening Classrooms, Engaging Minds, and a lot of these charts are from that. Then I went into virtual worlds. Now I went all big into Second Life. And then I went into OpenSim. OpenSim is kind of an open version of Second Life. I've kind of moved a little bit. Reaction Grid, the company I used for OpenSim, stopped supporting it, and they wanted me to use to Jibe Unity 3D. Anybody using Jibe or Unity? Okay, well, I wasn't smart enough. I had problems with it. Okay, and if I can't figure it out, usually I won't do it with my kids. So I kind of did some 3D stuff in Google SketchUp. I'm dying to get a 3D printer. Got some great ideas from the Makerspace yesterday. But this year in my objectives, we're going to move into Minecraft. We're going to do some things with that. Now we're doing Scratch, which is great. But I think that if you're teaching geometry, do we have any geometry teachers in here? Okay, the Scratch and 3D Worlds are great because they really help them understand. Scratch helps them understand the X and Y axis. 3D worlds help them understand X, Y, Z. Okay, and I was teaching Scratch last week, and I was pointing my mouse at it, and they were seeing the X and Y coordinates. And those kids were in geometry, my 10th graders, most of them were in geometry. And I said, okay, you know geometry, how you have the axis, and you have the X, Y, and Z, and you have 0 in the middle. Okay, look at what this is doing. And they were like, oh, you mean geometry is real? Like it's in the real world? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, really? And I said, you know how you can do these things and the lines go all different places? Well, programmers have to do that so that they can say where your video game creature is going to move on the screen. Those are just formulas. And they're like, wow, that's real. So and it just changed what they felt about it. So I think that 3D is real important for schools to have. And then you can Google SketchUp is free. And the cool thing about that is you can download all kinds of cool SketchUps, and they can model things and that sort of thing. Now, I've had a student do a lot in Blender. Blender is a really cool open source way, free, that they can do 3D. And I wanted to bring this up to make a point. Is anybody do Genius Hour or Genius Projects? Anybody do any of that? Okay. How about 20% time projects? Anybody heard of that? Okay, Google. I was at Google a couple years back speaking at a Google Certified Teacher Academy and becoming one. And I found out that over half of the innovations at Google happen because of what they call the Google 20%. Every employee is expected to work on a project of interest to them for 20% of their time. Okay, Gmail and Google Translate are two examples of what came out of Google 20%. Okay, so what I have my students do, now I do Genius Hour in the fall. That means every Friday, I try every Friday. I can't all Fridays, but most Fridays. If we're on track for the week, we'll have Genius Hour, and they're able to explore and do something with technology of interest to them. Okay, they may be programming a video game, they may be making an app, they have to propose it to me and I have to accept it, but then we do that on Fridays. Starting in January, they work on a project, 20% of their time, that is of interest to them. The student who used Blender, he wanted to make a Blender movie. He got so far past anything I could understand, you know, and I tell my students, if you pick something I don't know how to do, I will help you find the people who are experts. And then I will supervise your interaction with those people online, and those forums, and those hashtags. But you cannot expect me to be the expert because you will be the expert, and your responsibility is if it's really cool, you have to teach me. So Blender is one of those things, and I wasn't smart enough for him to be able to teach me. But I can do a little bit, not much. I've done a lot, and I'm going to skip ahead of that. Okay, QR codes. Anybody using these? Okay, QR codes and augmented reality. These are a lot of fun. They're very useful, especially if you have a lot of people who have their own device. We went bring your own device this year. So if I have a link and they want to bring it up on their phone, they can snap a picture and they can go to that. One thing I want to point out about QR codes. Okay, this is my favorite QR code maker. It's called Kaywa, qrcode.kaywa, K-A-Y-W-A.com. Now, here is a link right here that I made out of my QR code classroom guide. You see how big this is? You see how many more dots it has in it? Okay, the more letters you have, the more dots it has. Okay? And when you start having a lot of dots and you start having distance like here, some of you, when you try to take a picture of this, you might have problems because there's a lot of little dots in here. So what I do is I take my QR code into bit.ly and I shorten it. So I shorten my link down to a little short link, which is this link right here. So if you go to j.mp/class-QR, you will go to my QR code classroom guide, a very popular guide that I wrote some time back about how I use QR codes to grade. Okay, because if somebody turns in a piece of paper that they print out from the web, I want to go on the web and make sure that they publish that correctly and that it's really what they say that it is. So I use my iPad and I snap a picture of the QR code that they put on that, and it takes my iPad to it just like that. So it has cut my grading time down for blog posts so much faster than it was before, because everything has to have what we call a hard link. QR codes are hard links. They are links from the physical world to the virtual world. Okay, so we use a lot. And see how much smaller and more concise that is, and a lot easier to read. So shorten your links if you're going to get into QR codes. It just saves time. Unless your school blocks Bitly or something like that. That's the only thing you have to be aware of. Some schools block it, so check it. There's also a Firefox plugin and a Chrome plugin that'll let you automatically turn web pages into QR codes real quickly, and that's another way to do that. Now, then I went paperless. I said, you know what? I'm killing a bunch of trees here, and even though I'm a farm girl and Dad has a lot of pine trees, I was just throwing it away. They were just printing it, and then I was done. So I used Dropbox. We print to e-paper. Okay, so I say print it to e-paper. That means print it as a PDF. So used to, every day, they would see me going out of the school with a bag of papers like this thick, okay, because I taught the computer fundamentals and keyboarding and all these classes that generate all this paper. And I take a grade almost every day in keyboarding in particular. So I was taking all these papers. Well, I don't anymore. I don't because they print it to e-paper into Dropbox, and I do all my grading on my iPad. Now flip through it. I could take it in, if I need to write on it, I can take it into Notarize and write on it, put it back in Dropbox. I do have a blog post on how I do this. It's called A Paperless as Possible Classroom. Or you can tweet me or ask me if you can't find it, and I'll share you how I do that. Now, we are doing a lot with SkyDrive. SkyDrive, anybody using Windows 8? I actually love Windows 8. I think I'm the only one on the planet who loves it. But once on Windows 8, once you figure out that your web browsers, you need to right-click and make sure they launch from the desktop, you're okay. The way they launch web browsers is really an issue in Windows 8. So if you know somebody who's cussing at Windows 8, just go in Chrome and look for a little button that says Launch from Desktop. That's important. So if you know somebody who hates Windows 8, launch from desktop. And if you launch it from desktop, it is a full-fledged, beautiful web browser. If you launch it as an app, you can't download or install anything and you start cussing. Okay, so it took me a week and a half to figure that out. So OneNote is great, SkyDrive, but the point with all of these, and we use all these in my classrooms because I want my students to be able to use anything and everything. Google Drive, can you upload to Google Drive? Can you convert a file? I'll actually have a test where I give the kids a open document format file and they have to convert it and they have to do all kinds of stuff. Now, I'm a technology teacher, so I can get away with that, and most of you are not. But if you are, do we have any technology teachers in here? Okay. Y'all can see me later, and I can tell you some tricks about, but I actually teach them all the hotkeys. I want them to know how to run a computer without a mouse if the mouse goes bad, how to be able to do everything just using the keyboard. Okay, video game programming. This is kind of my new thing. I've been doing a lot of programming and that sort of thing, but Scratch and Game Maker, and if you have anybody one-to-one iPad? No one-to-one anybody? And a bunch of you said you had kids. Any of your kids have iPads? Okay, so download Codable, age 5 and up. It'll teach them how to program. And Hopscotch, 4th and up. Wes Fryer has an amazing free ebook. It's free, and he keeps updating it on how to use Hopscotch, and he's using it in science and math middle school classes. So Hopscotch is a really cool app, and again, all these links right here are actually, if you go to j.mp/15-code, that's a link to the Edutopia article I referenced this morning, 15 ways to code with kids even when you don't have a computer. So these are some of the things, though, that I've added in my classroom. Simulation environments. I was real concerned. You know how when your kids go to college and you look at what they're doing and you're like, have I prepped my students for this? And I saw how heavy they are in online environments in college. I mean, a lot of courses are 15 to 25% online activity, discussion boards, and that sort of thing. And I'm real worried that a lot of us are not getting kids ready for that college environment. So I took my kids into the AIC conflict simulation with the University of Michigan because I wanted them to have an experience in a simulation environment. And when I say simulation, this is actually a very text-based simulation. Current events and history teachers, you will be very interested in this. It's a fantastic experience, and the kids really get to understand the Middle East. But this is an example of my framework. And then Socrative. How many of you said you were using Socrative already? Okay. You want to play with it a little bit. And one of the tips that I'll give you is make more quizzes than you think you'll need, because you can actually run quizzes. It's this thing called a space race. My kids love it. And the thing I love about Socrative is that we're bring your own device. So whether they're using a Droid or an iPad or a computer or whatever, they can do Socrative on anything, the phone, and, you know, and I have extra devices and computers I give people if they don't have theirs. And then it captures everything and puts it in a spreadsheet. So you don't lose that. You still know what they answered right and what they answered wrong. But the thing I love about it is I could post, so I just taught binary numbers, okay? And that's really geeky, but I have to teach it in my Introduction to Computer Science course. Well, when you start throwing a bunch of ones and zeros up there and you say that only ones and zeros exist on this planet, on the planet of binary bits and bytes, they kind of freak out a little bit. And so I can put the questions on there and I can see when I can see the moment everybody gets it. Because here's what always happens, and I know that y'all know this is true. Everybody nods their head, right? Because 3 or 4 of them who really don't get it, don't want anybody to know that they're stupid because they feel stupid, and they really want you to move on because their thought is that if she can just move on, I'm just choosing not to learn this, okay? And I tell my kids I will not move on until every one of you make an A. I will test on binary because it's that important. It's part of my objectives, and I expect every single one of my kids to know how to add in binary, convert in binary, and then convert from all the memory. So can they convert from gig to terabytes? That's the language of the modern world. I want them to be able to do that. So I test on it until every kid makes an A. And usually it's 5 days. And it used to be 7 days. It's 5 days because I used Socrative this time, which is fantastic. So I've kind of moved, and this is all my framework. Now when I say go to Socrative, they already have my room number written down. I don't have to do anything. They just go to Socrative. When I say create a Google presentation and embed it on the wiki, I have nothing to teach, you know, because I built this tool set. I started in 8th grade and I teach them the Ning. In 9th grade, I add wikis, I add this, I add that. If I say I want you to create a scratch animation on such and such, they can do that because that's part of my toolkit. So you pick the 1 or 2 or 3 tools and add every year. Now I want you to notice, look at 2005. How many tools did I have in 2005 when I really got started with this Web 2 stuff? 2. I added 3 more, I added several in 2006 because I kind of got it. I was real scared at first. Okay, and then I added 1 thing in 2007, but look at this, 2007 to 2010, I didn't add anything else. I had all I needed. And then 2011 and now 2013, I'm kind of innovating again. So you'll build your tool set as a teacher, but don't start with a ton of stuff. Start with 1 or 2. You might say, I like that Socrative thing, or I like this thing, or that thing, and that's what you do. So this framework holds everything I do. This is the most important concept for differentiating is, am I adding tools that use multiple senses that I can use with kids, and it's not about the tool, it's about what I'm teaching. So you teach them how to use the tool. VoiceThread, anybody using VoiceThread? That's one of my favorite tools for elementary kids because if you can teach them to talk in a topic sentence when they get ready to write in a topic sentence, they can do that. So how do we assemble this framework? Couple things you need to know when you take your kids online. The first thing they've got to know is A, how to hyperlink, and B, how to embed. So I know that this is probably really beneath most of you, but I am going to show you the slides I show my kids when I show them how to embed and hyperlink. Okay? So this is from ClassTools.net. ClassTools.net is one of my favorite websites for graphic organizers. They have Fakebook. If you're a literature or history teacher, you should definitely use Fakebook with your kids because they can make a fake Facebook profile for famous people in history. It's a great tool to use. It's ClassTools.net and they have fake Twitter and fake SMS also. So this is what I did with this project is I said, what are the 10 most important events in the digital revolution? Select them out of the chapter and online and prepare to defend your answer. Okay, so I had them pick the 10 most important events, and they had to be prepared to defend their answer. And that's something we all need to be able to do. So they had to read the chapter and figure out what are the 10 most important things that happened in this chapter. And you know, that's pretty hard. And then how do we embed it? So you can see the hyperlink there, and you can see the timeline. So the embed code on YouTube has actually changed, and it's down there now. I need to update this. But do they know how to copy the embed code? And do they know how to copy the URL or the hyperlink? So when I tell my kids, grab the embed code and put it on the wiki, They need to know how to find the embed code, whatever tool it is. So I always point out where's the embed code if they can't find it. Now they should kind of know how to find it, because that's what you use for every tool. I use the Vickie to hold everything together. So they may be using 5 different tools out here, but I don't have to go here and there and yonder. It's all in one place, either pasted in the Google Doc or on the Vickie. So I love ToonDo. There's the embed code right over there. There's the URL link at the top. Okay, there's the URL link at the top. The embed code, usually if you can find the little gear, that's where it is, and this is a timeline at classtools.net. So I want them to know how to embed multimedia. I want them to know how to hyperlink. Okay, and if they can embed and hyperlink, that opens up the whole world, and you can use just about any tool with your kids. Okay, how many of you already teach your kids to embed and hyperlink? A few of you. It's very important, and if you are not the geeky teacher, how many of you are not the geeky teacher at your school? You're totally not. Okay, you need to go to your IT person if you have the kids rotate through there for enrichment and say, please make sure my kids know how to hyperlink and how to embed. Okay, I don't have time to go through all about digital citizenship. I have this slide though to say, you know what? You should have a digital citizenship model that you talk about at your school, whatever it is. This happens to be the one taken from my book. It's on page 98 of Flattening Classrooms, Engaging Minds. And we actually teach the kids all about the lifelong skills of learning, but also how to be safe online. The big thing is that online behavior has offline consequences. Always, always, always. I do not understand why so many years people have punished the tool. Oh, somebody wrote something bad on the Vickie. Let's ban the Vickie. What? You know, I mean, Johnny hit Susie and we didn't cut his hand off. So we use the tools and we hold kids accountable. And that's what we need to teach them. Now, I use RSS. Anytime it's a public site, I use RSS to monitor. I'll talk more about that in my Flattening Classroom session. So we've talked about building a framework. I've given you an example of my framework. I hope you'll sketch out your own framework and what it is. Now let's talk about learning styles. You've got all the different ways that kids learn. And I use this to pick my tools. So every tool that I picked on my framework, I picked it by doing, I call this the pie planning tool. I actually have a blank print out of this. It's in my book as a blank as well. Now you get to pick. Okay, y'all about to vote. I'm not going to do a poll everywhere or anything because we're not trusting the network to stay up. So we've got educational networking, number 1, wikis, number 2, and digital storytelling, number 3, and you're about to vote, and I'm going to have to just have a show of hands. Some of you in the front, on the front row, y'all help me figure out who has the most, or maybe my back row people should help. Okay, y'all ready to vote? Okay, if you want to see how all the learning styles apply to using an educational network, raise your hand. Okay, just a few. Okay, wikis. I think a few more. Okay, digital storytelling. Okay, I think it's between digital storytelling and wikis. Let's revote. Wikis and digital storytelling. Okay, digital storytelling 1. I've got to run down here and click. Now, all the slides are here, but I have just given you an example of giving a choice. So in Edmodo, you're going to see the answer for educational networking and wikis, but we picked digital storytelling. So I have just given you a choice as an audience. Okay, and so I click on that, and of course those are just hyperlinks within PowerPoint. So let's take a look at digital storytelling. So what I ask myself when I pick a tool, how can I engage every single kid in using this tool? Okay? So we start with linguistic and we say, okay, digital storytelling. Script writers, our linguistic learners will really be interested in writing scripts and really working with the scripts. Now, one thing you need to remember is that none of us are one slice. We're all a mix. And you don't just say, hey, you know, you have a linguistic learning style, you have to write the script. It doesn't work that way. But just know that when you pick a tool that you can fill something in on every pie here, that you have just picked a tool that's going to naturally hit everybody, okay? So you're looking for tools where I have something I can write in every piece of pie. So logical mathematical, we have our call sheets, our production schedule, our assistant director. Now, I'm mentioning some terms that you just probably do not know. If you want to know these terms, there's a great book with a really weird name. okay? I always hesitate to say it because people do misunderstand me. Okay, it's called pulling off your shorts, okay? It's talking about short film, okay? But it's movie making for teens, pulling off your shorts. And it's written by some filmmakers. It's an amazing book. I used it to really help me understand about digital film and how to use it with kids. So when you want to learn all about these terms in digital storytelling and filmmaking, it's a great book to read. They're not educators, but they do teach you how to do it with kids. So your naturalists, they're your scene scouts, the scene setup and storyboarding. And you know, there are kids that learn better sitting up under a tree. And so I have 6 minutes left. 15. Oh, okay, because she doesn't have 15 fingers. She's my timer. So your scene scouts, they set up, they storyboard. So when you get these kids outside, a lot of them will learn better. Okay, your spatial camera smart. The big thing you have to be careful on when you use digital storytelling is don't make every kid think they have to act. If you do, you will have some kids out the next day, I promise. There are people that are petrified of being up here on stage, and there are people that are petrified of being on film. But a lot of the people who are petrified of being on film are amazing camera people. They are. You never know who they're going to be, and it's striking the camera angles they get and the stuff they do. And I love really using digital filmmaking because a lot of the kids who are amazing cameramen and camera women are not your A+ students. They're not. And it gives them a real sense of identity when they are an amazing camera person. Everybody wants them because they are cool now. So when you start having all these projects, you'll start seeing people who are great at things. Now, your bodily kinesthetic, acting, presenting, lighting, flow, and movement. I do have a cheap lighting rig I bought from B&H Photography for about $258. If you get into green screen, you can buy a $7 piece of plastic at eBay. And you can, they can fly and they can do all kinds of cool stuff if you really get into it. Okay, your musical, your audio editing, your music selection, and your sound capture. Great films are made by the audio track. People from Hollywood will tell you that over and over and over. And I've worked with Frank Gutler, who wrote the AFI film curriculum. And that's what he says, is that people do not focus enough on the soundtrack. So you want to really try to help people get good sound and high quality sound. And these musical people, they can hear anything. I have a boy who's really strong with his auditory intelligence, really. And he can put on that and he can hear anything. He can say, "Miss Vickie, I hear a buzz." And I'm like, "What?" "Miss Vickie, I hear a buzz." I mean, and literally there was like a dirt dauber stuck in my window, you know, and he heard it. So these auditory kids, it gives them something they can really do. And then your interpersonal. These, a lot of times, they're your actors. They have movie ideas, they're vision casting, they're great directors, they can tell people where to go. And then your intrapersonal. Your people who have interpersonal intelligence is how I get along with you. Intrapersonal doesn't mean they're introverted. Intrapersonal means I'm really in touch with who I am. Intrapersonal intelligence, a lot of times these kids, they do not mind telling on other people. You have to work with them because they will sometimes make enemies. But the intrapersonal intelligence, they tend to be bloggers, like me. Okay, I'm very in tune with what I think, and we have to really work on paying attention to others and considering their importance. So, multiple intelligences is a planning tool. It is a way. So if you take your tool you've picked and you just go around the circle and you say, okay, what is a way I can use this tool to hit this kind of intelligence? So you can think about it. Then you're picking tools in your tool set that help you reach every child. Okay, and then this is an example. This is a Learning Commons. Okay, so we had those librarians. Where are you, librarians? Okay, so what you need to do is plan your Learning Commons and say, do I have something for every single child here that's going to reach every child? And then this is a wiki over here. This is out of the book. Okay, this is VoiceThread. This is why I like VoiceThread. When I sat down with VoiceThread and I took a look at it and I put in all the different ways that you use VoiceThread, look at that. You're reaching all the different styles. Okay, so you see, so what you're looking for is tools to pick in your tool set that fill up the whole pie. Okay, how about interests? And this reminds me of my nephew David. You can make my body go to school, but my soul will be outside running through sprinklers. Okay? You cannot, you can make a child put their body in the chair, but they are the only one that can bring their soul to school. They're the only one that can bring who they are into your classroom. That is their choice. That is the inside them. And how do we get them interested in what we are teaching? You know how hard it is. Not every kid loves everything you do, and you're sitting here thinking, do I have to sing? Do I have to dance? Do I have to get on the desk? What am I going to do to get your attention? I'm not going to stop until I get it. But you can get it. So here are some of the ways that I do it. When I'm sitting here going, how am I going to reach every child? Do I do projects that let them bring in their hobbies, their interests, theater, sports, poetry, arts, public speaking, reading, academics, themes, causes. Themes and causes, these are so important. That's why Choose to Matter is such a great movement, because kids pick a need and then try to meet it. Be really careful just because, and I am at a football school. My school, my headmaster is the head coach for the football team. Okay, so my school is very, very football. Some of my kids hate it. Just because 80% of my kids love football, I cannot gear towards that for everything. When I give choices, I have to let kids pick. And so I give an assignment. What is something, this is going to be a passion project. You are going to teach us something that you are interested in using blank. And my objectives are teaching digital film, or my objectives are this or that. So here's some great ways. Now, I think every classroom should have an invention project where they invent something. My students invent a new way to access the internet that they have never heard of before. And I got some amazing projects. You can see my projects on westwood.wikispaces.com. The kids had to make commercials for it. One of the coolest was a basketball that kept score of the game, and it used the same technology used in a dog fence, that when it went out of bounds, it would tell you who touched it last, and all the players had little RFIDs on them. And it was an amazing idea, and I'm like, this is going to happen. You're going to have a basketball that keeps score with a scoreboard. It was a great idea. But how can you do that in history? Well, what if Nelson Mandela and Abraham Lincoln had a conversation about comparing apartheid and slavery in the U.S.? What would they say? And write a script, or write the conversation of what they would say. Now that would require some deep thinking, wouldn't it? You've got to give them questions that they cannot find the answers in Wikipedia. Tell me about the pyramids doesn't cut it. Compare the pyramids to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and how they were constructed and the vision for those. Now that requires some thinking. Okay, so have them invent, have them do things that are different and create. Now what happens though when you have some kids who are really ready and some kids aren't? Here's how I do it in my classroom. My more than ready kids, I got to give them a way to get past 100. Awards, halls of fame. I always like to have things where I recognize or give shout outs to really cool things. Now this is not always your A+ students, but it's students who do really cool stuff. Okay, so these are all the ways your more than ready kids are. So Susie finishes the project 3 days early. What do? Well, say if it's a video project, I say, you know what, Susie, your video is great, but you've got a little bit of a weakness here, here, and here. Why not? What do you think if I took you in the auditorium, I set up the green screen, and I showed you how to do it, and I just let you add a little bit of green screen, and you can fly, you know, in this part of your video? Susie says, cool. So Susie goes and sets it up. Well, then Joey hears what I'm telling Susie and says, well, Miss Vickie, I think I can finish up really fast, because Joey was dragging his feet because he didn't want to have to do anything extra. And Susie is learning how to green screen. So Joey finishes up, so can I go do that with Susie? Well, what I have just done is I have made Susie Miss Susie Q cool. Susie is now the coolest in the class, and I promise you, if Susie finished first 3 days early and raised her hand and said, I'm done, she is not the coolest kid in the class. Okay? But I have just made her the coolest kid in the class. So now Susie is an expert at green screen, so I have taught her stuff, and I have Susie teaching to pull these kids up. And we're using green screen, and all I had to teach was 1 or 2 students. And if you've ever taught green screen, you know that's all you want to teach at the same time. You cannot, it's hard to teach 20 kids green screen at the same time. So this is what I do with my More Than Ready. They're my teachers, they're moving ahead, they're getting cool stuff. My Ready, for every multi-day project, I have a rubric. Every single one. They can download it from the wiki. I don't print them out and hand them out because they always lose them. They never keep up with anything. So I have them on there. They have to self-track their rubrics. And I say, okay, where are you on your rubric? And they will show me. And they have to verbally report to me and show me their rubric every day. I make sure they're on track. Okay? And so they over-the-shoulder report. Now, then I have my not quite ready kids. And a lot of these, we have about a third of our kids who have LDs at my school. And the not quite ready kids, first of all, they cannot keep up with their rubric at all. So I have a special place for every class where I have a place where kids can keep their stuff who can't keep up with it. They will take it to their locker, but 2 of my 3, there's nothing, I mean, you hate to say there's nothing they can do. My Georgia Tech one he's really overcome, but it's hard when you have that weakness. So I actually keep their rubrics and I say, okay, Joey, let's sit down and let's look at where you are. Well, a lot of times kids with LDs, they have a really hard time figuring out where they need to pick up from, especially on a multi-day project. So what I'll do is I'll sit down and say, okay, you did this already. Now maybe today you should focus your time here and we'll talk about it. Now by the end of that process, they're able to do their own projects and they a lot of times will move up to the ready level. Okay, I got to go real quick. I have 5 minutes left. Okay, so in Edmodo, you'll be able to see all these links of different things that you can use here. But facts, dates, timelines, events, I think you should have every kid on Quizlet. How many of you have your kids on Quizlet? Okay, if you've got to do it, then just use it. You can also make video games on classtools.net with your vocab and have the kids play each other's games that they make, which is really cool. Flashcard exchange, Google Docs, there's all kinds of apps like Cram and that sort of thing. Details and significant individuals, these are great wiki group projects. I love fake Facebook for that. And they can make live binders. Okay, let's keep going here. So, how about creating the environment in which they can learn? Okay, cooperative groups, choice boards, class rules, learning centers, and then your materials and supplies. The one thing I want to point out here, see where it says pit crew? Pit crew is where admin comes in. Okay, you can control your classroom, but there are times and places where you do have to interact with admin and rule breaking and that sort of thing, keeping everything working. These are things that you do need help with. Okay, and make sure every kid has their own ID. Do not share IDs with the kids. Please do not share your ID with them. They need to all have their own ID. And customize your classroom. I'm flipping here real quick so we can get to admin. Okay, so again, admin, you got to make sure it's working. You got to make sure they all have access. Okay, so as we finish up, technology is the vehicle, but remember, it is not the only vehicle you have. Nothing can replace you, the engaged teacher. Nothing can replace you. There are times where I say, kids, leave every single piece of technology you have, and we're going to go out and we're going to sit under a tree. And we're going to talk about Friedman's book, The World is Flat, and what it means without your gadgets in front of you, because I want to know what you think. So, when you're teaching students to drive your own learning, that is when technology becomes worth the price. So, enjoy your lunch. I'll stay for a little bit, but I did get you out early. You're a great audience. Thanks.